Hello, everybody. Lawrence Temple here, and this is another edition of our From There to Here broadcast. We're in part two of a series that we're doing with women in leadership. It's called Women's Work, and this is the second one of our three or four guests in this series. This is my friend from once upon a time. We went to high school together. We're in the band, lieutenant and officers, and all that kind of stuff. This is Barbara Harding. And I'm not going to give her much of an introduction because I like to let my guests tell you what they are in quotes or what they do. But she fits the title of a woman in leadership quite well. All right, Barbara, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Larry. It's good to see you.
You too. Well, if you had to do your elevator speech where you're going to boil down who and what you are in just a few seconds, what would you say?
Oh, the few seconds part is a function of my character because I'm never short of having an opinion or something to say. So we'll see if we can keep it short.
Okay.
But I guess for our purposes today, I would describe myself as a poor kid who grew up in Central Florida and spent a lot of time with Larry in high school. We had a lot of fun together, and I look at where I am today as a reflection on what can be done through determination. So no one in my family ever went to college. No female in my family certainly ever went to college. But my brothers didn't go to college either. So I was the first person in my family to go through higher education. And it was mainly because I was surrounded by friends like you, Larry, where, I had friends that were going off to college. So I figured, well, I guess I should go to college too. But my parents didn't have the money to fund that. So I went into debt. And I not only went to college, I went to a private college, which was expensive. And a lot of people thought that wasn't possible. But I figured I'll go into debt and I'll figure it out later.
Okay.
Started college as a math major because I really enjoyed math. I had no career guidance beyond the teachers that I had in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So I just figured I would go into something that I enjoyed. So I thought it might be a teacher. And then a couple of years into college, I realized that I didn't want to just be a teacher. I wanted a stronger career, one that I could afford to do different things. Not that there's anything wrong with being a teacher, but I had aspirations to go a little beyond that. And so I changed over to a degree in finance. Still didn't know what I wanted to do. And so when I graduated from college, I basically just said, well, I still don't know what I want to, don't know what I want to do. So let me just go into banking until I figure it out. And 35 years later, here I am in banking. So I guess my message would be, don't think that you have to know what you want to do. Find something that you have an interest in and explore it and make your decisions along the way. I think too many kids and too many people my age as well, they peg themselves into a certain path based upon some label or some track that someone told them they should be on, when I think you should just free flow it and make that decision as you go, but make it deliberately and strategically.
You've touched on several things that I was in my mind going to talk about, and you hit them already. One was so I've noticed from young people in their late teens, early 20s, they look at another friend who seems like they have it figured out. And now
Right,
they feel bad in comparison because they don't know every step of their future like their
right.
friend seems to. And that's why I like what you were just sharing about figuring some things out and not knowing everything before you take a step.
Right, exactly. And when I went to school at Stetson University, which is about 30 minutes from home for us, right? Whereas my friends like you went off to universities a little further away. And one of the reasons I went to Stetson University is that's where I took my music lessons, and I thought the campus was pretty. So there was no brilliance in my selection.
Mm.
It
Mm-hmm.
was just that I didn't have a car, and my parents picked me up every weekend and brought me back to Ormond Beach to work. So I had to work
Wow.
every weekend. And so I needed to be close to home, but I wanted to go to a good school. So I worked a job at home on the weekends, and I worked two jobs on campus during the week. And that's how I paid my way. And, again, my message is I am not a special person. I'm not While I was academic, I always liked getting good grades. I don't really consider myself a really smart person. I can take a test, I can study for a test, and
Okay.
uh, but I grew up in a family where I wasn't well read. I didn't have a lot of high ambitions. I just wanted to succeed in whatever way someone was going to measure me. So that's the key to me. That's the key, is to just get out there and get in the game, and then look for mentors along your path. And the right path, I feel, will reveal itself to you if you have that baseline determination. It's the determination more than the aptitude that has propelled my life. Because every promotion I ever got throughout my career in
Mm-hmm.
banking, it was never one that I pursued. It was someone tapping me on the shoulder saying, "We think you'd be good at this," and me responding, "I don't think I'd be good at that. Are you sure I'm the
Yeah.
person that you want?" And then I would trust in their perspective of me, because it was always higher than my own perspective of myself. So my other warning that I would share with your viewers is, don't listen to the voices in your head, because we are often too critical of ourselves.
Mm.
Find people in your life that you trust enough to trust their opinion of you more than you trust your opinion of yourself, because that's where the growth lives.
That, a theme that has come about with most of the guests I've had, about 10 or 11 guests, is they use different words, but the idea of self-talk, what goes on in your head beyond just your skills and aptitude, but what that voice that's in your head that might be loud or soft, positive or negative. I think every guest has in some way mentioned that, and I'm
Right.
glad you did. Uh, on that, since you didn't come from means, and I know I'm somewhat familiar with the school where you went. I went there later on for a master's degree, but I wasn't on campus like like an undergrad would be. I know that, of course, obviously there were some kids there who had more means than you did.
All of them.
Okay, okay. I was being nice, but yeah. So we hear people talking about a sense of like imposter syndrome, they call it, where you feel like, do I really belong here? These people have this more than me, that kind of thing. Is that something that you recall dealing with either as a student or in your employed life? Is that something that you remember dealing with even maybe before they had a name for it?
Yeah, I learned through my own daughter. She's 32. She's well established in her own career right now. She's a graduate of Florida. You'd be happy with that, right?
Go Gators.
But she introduced the concept. She goes, "Mom, I have imposter syndrome." And I said, "What's imposter syndrome?" And when she described it to me, I'm like, "Oh yeah, I've had that." Right. I would suggest to you that overachievers in general often have what is now defined as imposter syndrome. And I think, I know that I'm an overachiever, that my meets expectations is always higher than someone else's. So if I want to exceed expectations, my bar is always much higher than the bar anybody else can give me.
Okay.
Right. And because of that, I always felt like I'm always trying to go above and beyond. And that might come from, and you can maybe speak to this as well, I don't know if it's a gender thing. But I always, because I knew that I was fighting for my chance, I always felt like I had to perform greater than my male counterparts. My goal was not just to be here. My goal was, I had to be up here to be seen the way I wanted to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in that, in turn, if you're successful in that, it can accelerate your success, it can accelerate your career. But sometimes it accelerates your career, and all of a sudden you look around and you realize, I'm younger than a lot of these other people who are doing the same thing. Am I really as good at this as I think I am? Did I get here too soon? Why am I being recognized? But I think one of the things comes from that diversity. More companies, even more so now with the current generation, are focused on trying to look for women they can promote. minorities they can promote, different ethnicities they can promote to bring diversity into the workplace. So I think that that imposter syndrome just comes from being part of that group label, where you just always felt like I can't just do this much, I've got to do that much, right? So I don't necessarily think it's a negative. I think it can I think it can be used as a motivating element, just as your own personal gut check. If it becomes debilitating, to where it suppresses you and makes you not confident in your ability to present your ideas, then I think you should probably give it focus. For me, it makes me a planner, because if I plan, I can push that imposter feeling down, or that insecurity that many of us have, that we don't necessarily want our audience to see, but it's there. I believe we all have it. We just manage it in different ways.
I totally believe that 100%. This is one reason why I love doing this show, is because two guests will mention the same thing, but take a totally different perspective or attack on it. Because one of my other guests, several of them, mentioned this whole concept, and you described it in a way very different from
Right.
from them. That's why I love the input of different people, even on the same topic.
I have a question for you, Larry. Larry, do you remember in band class when we used to, at the end of every 9 weeks, I think, we had to play our scales? Do you remember that?
I do.
And probably the reason you remember it is because of performance anxiety. Would you agree?
I would. I can think of where I was, the poster on the board that had the different scales listed. All of it is crystal clear.
Yeah. And I have often told people in my career that the reason, I've had to get up and give speeches, and 90-minute speeches in some cases, kind of like a Tony Robbins type of a moment, where I had a headset, they did my makeup, all sorts of things, to like
Okay.
350 people. And people would say, well, how did you get to the point where you were comfortable standing up in front of 350 people and talking like I'm talking to you today? And I said, scales in high school. Because
Get
that
it.
performance anxiety as a musician, learning how to have to memorize your music, because you remember when we also had to prove to Mr. Williams that we had memorized our sheet music.
Yes, I
and
do.
and you had to stand up in front of like 50 of your friends in the room, and you had to perform, and it was stress management at a young age. And so I always felt like speaking was so much easier than playing my scales, or playing music by memory. So it's just relative. You have to find that thing that teaches you that I can overcome this because I did that thing over there.
That is amazing, and just how clear that is in my memory. I can see you standing up in a green windbreaker doing your scales. I can see it, and I can see what I was wearing each time I did. And that, that's part of the reason why, as a person in education, I encourage parents that put their kids in stuff, in
Yeah.
sports clubs, whatever, because it brings about situations where you have to do some uncomfortable things, but you grow by it.
Yeah.
And I love what you talked before about how it wasn't so much your aptitudes that made you successful. It was
Right.
that motivation, that drive, that kind of thing. And I try to tell kids, it's not the smart kid who gets A's in quotes.
Right.
It's the kid who knows I need to do XYZ right now so I can enjoy such and such later, when study, practice, whatever. And that's more so than just being born a genius from Zeus or something like that.
Yeah, and I think we have a tendency as human beings to label other people, whether it's by how they look, or how much money they make, or whatever that label might be. And I found in my career, when I looked at people that I aspired to be like them, I assumed a higher level of aptitude than what I later learned they really had.
Wow.
And so if you look at someone and you think, oh, I can't do that, there's this, or they're so smart, or I'm not ready for this, or you might just find that it's not so much their aptitude, it's something else. And I've shared this before. I've actually used this story in interviews, and I'll share it with you now because I think it encapsulates that really well. So, in banking, you do a lot of financial analysis. You look at financial statements and trends and whether or not a business is profitable and why are they profitable or why are they not profitable. So you do a lot of analysis. And there are different roles in the bank where you can be a frontline production person where you're responsible for calling on the clients, and figuring all that out. But
Mm-hmm.
or you can be a person that actually approves those deals. So the people that approve all those requests are the really, really smart people, right? And that was the way I looked at it because I was always on the front line. And I got to a point in my career where the head of risk for my business segment in the United States at Bank of America, he called me up and he says, I'd like you to be a credit officer. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm not smart enough to be a credit officer. I don't know what you know. And he's probably a good 15, 20 years older than me. And I said, Tom, I said, I'm not ready for that. I said, he goes, but Barb, I've seen you in action. I've reviewed your deals. I've looked at how you interact with customers. I've looked with how you interact with your teammates and how you look at risk and figure things out. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not as smart as you. Right. So all of that positive feedback that he gave me, I completely would not listen to.
Mm.
And I listened only to the voice in my head that said, I'm not as smart as you. And I turned him down twice. And this was a promotion, more money, bigger title, higher authority, more, whatever you want to call it, you're higher up in the food chain, right? And I turned him down twice because all I could say was, Tom, I am not as smart as you. You have misread me. I am not as smart as you. And then this is what he said to me, Larry, and I remember this and I use this with coaching of the teams that I manage today. He said, Barb, I'm not hiring you for what you know. He said, do you think we're sitting up here with a golden answer book that, we've already got all the answers? He says,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want somebody who thinks they already have the answer. He goes, I'm hiring you for your decision making, for your ability to ask the right questions. He goes, I don't want you to come thinking you already have the answers. I want somebody who knows how to ask the right questions. And after that, I accepted the position, and it was one of the biggest promotions in my career because I didn't in that moment understand that a promotion doesn't mean you already know how to do what they're asking you to do.
Mm-hmm.
It means that they see something in you, in your ability to problem solve or your ability to be tenacious in figuring it out, right? That's what it was.
That is, I'm going to use that segment of this interview for the little clips that I'm going to be sharing later because there's, oh goodness, so many levels to that. He
Yeah,
wasn't seeing based on what you knew, but what you had shown him that you were willing to go climb and get from what
right.
he had observed before.
Yeah, yeah.
That is,
So
wow.
again, it goes back to my first point of it's more how hard are you willing to work? What's your dedication? What's your personal brand? That's my other mantra in terms of how I coach is I
Mm-hmm.
view it as my responsibility as a manager to develop my team's brand as well as their individual brand, because that brand is what carries you through your career, whether you're a teacher or you're you work in banking or you're a doctor, or it transcends all industries. What do you want to be known for? What do you want people to say about you when you're not in the room? That's always how I ask that question.
Okay. That what you've talked several times about your mentoring or coaching people. I want to ask two questions on that, kind of from both sides. One, as a coach or mentor, what I guess what's your goal as a mentor or a coach as far as what you like to do for your mentees, students, etc. If that's a clear question.
Yeah. So there's a couple of different things when you lead a team. Obviously, you want to build a team that has the aptitude that's needed to get the job done, right? I mean, that's kind of common sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you're a manager, often you become a manager and the team is given to you. You didn't have the chance to choose who's on the team. You have to figure it out, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I've always viewed my role as a manager is to assess the abilities, the strengths and weaknesses of each individual, then to manage each individual to that assessment, not manage everyone the same. You're going to have, I've never believed that the best team does not have all A players. It's just like football. You know, you have different people on the field that are good at different things. And if you ask a lineman to be a quarterback, guess what? He's going to fail.
Okay.
Right. So business is the same thing. You have to figure out who's my QB, who's my lineman, who's my receiver, and why, and then coach to those things. And my responsibility above and beyond that is obviously the team needs to have its goals identified and we need to achieve or exceed those goals. But my job as a manager is to create job satisfaction for my employees, right? I want them to not hate the moment that their alarm clock goes off in the morning. And I take that responsibility seriously. And I can say that with the teams that I've managed and the different roles I've had across the country, I get the greatest job satisfaction when I create that job satisfaction for my people.
I have not heard it worded that way when you talked about not wanting them to hate that alarm going off, but that is crystal clear. And I get what you're saying about how everyone on the team is not the same. When I was an administrator, at a high school, I saw the same thing. If I'm walking down the hall and I'm talking to 8 of the teachers, in the hallways, whatever, I don't talk to them all the same. The one person
Right.
that can joke and kid around with, the other one's more serious. This one just
Right.
lost their house. You talk to them differently, or a teacher in the classroom does the same thing. So I get that. It's not one
Yeah.
size fits all with human beings.
And I think that's what is the importance about what you're doing with this initiative that you've taken on, is hopefully we can help teach people in their younger years to focus on the things that transcend where you work, right? So
Mm-hmm.
whether you're a teacher or a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home dad, or you work in the oil industry, or you are a doctor, right? Where I think the wisdom comes from is when we realize the things that are common to all of those places, right?
Okay.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's just that's the connection that as I get older and I look back over the challenges in my career, that's when I start to see it gel, right? You see those common themes.
Mm-hmm. I see that clearly. Yeah, they're interchangeable. They go from one career to the next, to your home life, to all kind of
Right.
hops over all kind of walls, I would say.
Right.
From my reverse question on the mentorship coaching thing, how would you advise someone who works for someone else who feels that they are being limited or stymied by whoever's over them, being blocked by their district manager or etc.? Is there general advice you might pass on with that very general background?
Yeah. I think I just had this discussion with an employee earlier today, as a matter of fact. So I'm building a development plan, and I want to make sure I'm building the development plan for what this individual wants to do, not what I think she wants to do. Right?
Okay.
There's a big difference. And I can tell you in my own career, Larry, I never stayed in one position more than 2.5 years. Because I was willing to relocate, I kept getting promoted, and my success, kind of took care of itself, because there was always this new problem that somebody wanted me to go work on it, or manage a different team, or cross pollinate East and West culture, kind of a thing.
Mm.
So it just kind of happened on its own. And I think today, more so even than when we were younger, I think people chase the next position because they're chasing the next salary, right? And so they, in their pursuit of a salary,
Mm-hmm.
They haven't stopped to think if they really want the job that goes with that salary, right? So
Yeah.
the job that I'm in today, I actually make less money than the job I had 4 years ago. But the reason I took this job has everything to do with other aspects of job satisfaction more so than compensation alone. So
Okay.
I think especially in an inflationary environment, in a high debt environment where people have student loans or they have personal debt, or they borrowed too much on their Macy's credit card, or they bought a brand new car when they should have bought a used car, so they have this
Mm.
big giant payment. I think there are factors in people's lives that make them chase the salary more than the role itself. So there are a lot of managers that are managers because they wanted the title, not because they enjoy being a manager.
Wow.
So the first thing I would say is think positively and don't assume that your manager's an obstacle because he doesn't like you or doesn't want to support you. He may not just enjoy being a manager. So he does those things when the HR department makes him do it at the end of the year when he does your performance review. It's not something he enjoys day in and day out. So when you have someone like that, you have to take the reins yourself, right? So if you meet with your manager or don't meet with your manager and you're supposed to discuss a development plan, then what I would do is I would sit down and develop my own development plan. And then I would reach out to my boss and I would say, let's just say the boss's name is Tom, right? Tom, I know you're busy. I know you've got a lot on your plate. I've been given some thought to kind of how I want to see myself 3 years from now. What's the best way I can contribute to our team or to our company? And I'd like to share those thoughts with you. Could we put some time on the calendar, 2, 3 weeks out, and I'll
Mm.
take responsibility for the agenda. And I just like to walk you through some of the things that I'm thinking about. And gosh, you're such an experienced person. You've been with this company for so long. I really think that my planning would benefit from your insight and advice. Could we set aside some time to do that? So in that conversation, you've achieved in what, I don't know, 30, 45 seconds of talking, right? You've recognized him and played to his ego, right? Because maybe he wants to help but doesn't, or maybe he's a jerk and he doesn't want to help because he's a jerk. There,
Okay.
there's all sorts of people out in the world, and the job role doesn't define whether you're a good person or a bad person always. So, but whatever that reason, you're driving accountability and you're presenting it in such a way that he can't say no, right? Now, the worst he could do is deflect and say,
Okay.
oh, well, Barb, I don't really have the time. And okay, well, that's Tom. I understand. Gosh, it's amazing what you get done, Tom. I know you're a busy man. How about if we put it out a month out, and then that'll give me more time to really prepare for this. You won't have to do a thing. I just really need your expertise, Tom, and I just need you to listen to my plan and give me some feedback, because I really value the career path that you've taken, and I want to make sure I learn as much from that as I can while we're working together. Can we do that? And the determination, and you do it while you are complimenting their ego. You're acknowledging their schedule because they're busy.
Mm.
They could be busy for good reasons or bad reasons, right? You just assume they're all good reasons. And you are never going to hurt yourself by complimenting another person, even if professionally you don't have a high degree of respect for that person.
Uh-huh.
That high
Uh-huh.
degree of respect is earned, right? You might be right, but you might be wrong. You might be wrong. Maybe he doesn't have time because outside of the office, his wife is dying of cancer. Maybe he doesn't have focus because his boss is also not mentoring him and he's scrambling, but he's trying to keep that hidden. It's never a bad thing to assume the positive and build your strategy off of the positive, because then you won't get sucked in to the negative, whether it's an accurate assessment or an inaccurate assessment.
Now that's good. I have a friend who is in this situation. I'm thinking about it. I'm going to share this clip of this part of the conversation with her because word for word, step by step, it is her situation, and that advice would be very good for her.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, you use some words that we don't associate with bankers. You know, positivity and that kind of stuff. You know, we kind of get this dark Dracula with the cloak image of
A
bankers,
label, right? A label,
a
right?
label like we do with lawyers and other things like that. So you're breaking all kind of paradigms just with this conversation.
Yep.
Um, we have about 5 minutes left, as far as my timer, but this is perfect. What I wanted to ask, I like to ask this of a lot of our guests. Let's say you have a friend who has a child who's a senior in high school. They're going to be graduating in a few weeks, and they come to you because they respect your friend and they respect things you've done. They say, "Listen, my daughter Sally or my son Billy, he's a good kid. He's always made very good grades. He's been involved in school. He did all the things in high school you're supposed to do. But as he's getting ready to get out of high school, he's really unclear about what he wants to do with his life." He says that.
Right.
Would you mind taking him to lunch, talking with him, and
Mhm.
just giving him some input in this area? And you agree to do that, and you sit down with Billy or Sally. What kind of things could you envision you would say to that young person in that situation?
Well, I would first ask more questions than I make statements, right?
Okay.
Because I think
Okay.
we rush to solutions, right? And much like coaching an employee on their development plan, you don't want to craft a development plan for anyone, whether it's your 18-year-old child or a 40-year-old person that reports to you,
Okay.
that doesn't fit what that child may want to do. Now, that being said, a lot of times at 18, you don't know what you want to do, right? A lot of
I did
people at
not.
yeah, a lot of people at 40 still don't know what they want to do. And like me, 35 years later, I'm still in banking, right? And it wasn't necessarily what I thought I wanted to do. It just turned into a really great career, especially during the years when I was a single mom. I had a balance that really helped me do that. But I think differently on this than I thought when I was in high school.
Okay.
I thought the best route to success was go to college at any cost, right? After years and years of watching Dirty Mike on television about all the jobs in America that do not require a college education,
Mm-hmm.
you have to decide. I have two daughters, one that went to college, one that went into military service, and both those suited their personalities. So I think as parents, we have to be careful that we don't establish a standard of that next step out of a label, right? I have a friend who her husband and her brother went to lineman school, so they're electrical linemen.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys make a very good salary. And that is a field that is always in demand. It's not a position that you're going to get eliminated from. I have a successful career of 35 years, but I've lost my job 3 times, despite the fact that I was labeled as a top performer in the organization.
Wow.
And that happens through reorganization, or as a company changes its focus, or what have you. And from a
Okay.
legal standpoint, they have to eliminate jobs in an objective way. So you're just a number when they reorganize. It doesn't matter if you are a 5 on a scale of 5. They can end up keeping the underperformers and losing the top performers because they have to demonstrate that they're being objective. So there's you would think that if you're a top performer, you wouldn't ever get displaced. And I'm just
Right.
saying that's not the case, right? So I think for that child, you have to ask questions and to understand their motivation, because I think for kids that may not be ready to go to college, why put a kid into a college scenario who's been maybe a C student in high school, right? You're setting them up to feel like they're a failure, right? Maybe an academic environment is not their strong suit.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a trade school would be better. Maybe taking a year off and working full time somewhere else. But I do think that we allow kids to be indecisive by not having them have accountability. In my family, once you turned 18, you either started paying rent or you moved out.
Wow. Wow.
It might seem harsh in today's standard, but it was never delivered harshly. It was just, well, you're an adult now. So if you want to live at home, you're welcome to live at home, but you're going to contribute, as an adult.
Okay.
If you, so for me, because I went to college, I didn't have to pay rent. So because I went to college, no rent. So I think if you have a child who's indecisive, see what their interests are, see kind of where they want to go. But I would focus, like we talked at the top of this. It's not so much about knowing your path. Find something that interests you and dedicate yourself to it. So if that's being a manager of the Pizza Hut locally till you figure things out, I would let someone do that. The point is, teach them to be independent and to be able to sustain themselves. And if they're choosing a path that isn't a sustainable path from an income standpoint or an aptitude standpoint, then coach to that. But it's kind of like when you send your kids to school when they're pre-K, right? You're not really trying to teach them. You're trying to give them a love of learning, right? There's a difference.
Very good.
Right?
I get that.
So I think as kids transition into independence and actually be an adult, it's not so much what they do, but you want them to have an aspiration to be dedicated to what they do, right?
Definitely.
So you got to ask a lot of questions. I mean, I would just have to read the play with the particular kid or with the family. And I would love that, I've actually done this a couple of times with a friend of mine is a big brother to a young man over in Aspen, Colorado. And he's a young man who doesn't really have a good home life. And so he's counseling him as a big brother. And we actually got together for this lunch, but he's actually looking to go into AmeriCorps. I never knew what AmeriCorps was till one of my best friends told me her son went through it.
Yep.
But it's kind of like Peace Corps for 2 years. They pay your room and board, you're fed, that's part of your compensation, and you go around the country and you might fight fires, you might help repair a dam, and you learn life skills while your expenses are taken care of, versus going into debt and going to college if that's not what suits your personality.